Hello guys, so for today's video, we are heading to oil rig area or station here in Fort McMurray where we can see the old extraction machine they used couple decades ago and they were huge. We are also going to visit Syncrude's Bison's Herd Sanctuary. Let's go! Alberta's oil sands are contained within the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, which hold most of Canada's onshore oil reserves. Oil sands deposits are located mostly within Alberta's borders, split into three different geological areas: Peace River, Cold Lake, and the Athabasca region, which is centered around the city of Fort McMurray. There are an estimated 1.8 trillion barrels of oil in the oil sands, but less than 10% of those barrels can be economically recovered with current technology. That works out to 159 billion barrels of oil, representing about 96% of the country's total oil reserves, placing Canada fourth after Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Oil sands production grew from just 200,000 barrels per day in the early 1980s to over a million in 2004, 2 million by 2013, and topped 3 million barrels per day by 2018. About half of those barrels are extracted in situ without disturbing any land, and the other half is extracted using traditional surface mining techniques. Let's take a look at how it all began, starting from the very beginning. The very first written recording of oil sands deposits date back to 1715. A Hudson's Bay employee received reports of a gum or black pitch found along the banks of the Athabasca River from a Chipewyan woman. Explorers Peter Pond and Alexander Mackenzie and would make similar observation in the late 1700s, referring to a bituminous fountains along the river banks, which gave off a coal-like smell when heated. Local First Nations people would mix the bitumen with spruce gum to waterproof their canoes. Several government-sponsored expeditions were carried out in the late 1800s. Geologists John Macoun and Robert Bell mapped out oil sands deposits in the Athabasca area with the aim of assessing any potential for future economic development. In the early 90s, engineer Sidney Els began to detailed survey of the Athabasca River, kicking off 3 decades of oil sands research. Dr. Carl Clark would later perfect a technique of extracting bitumen from the oil sands using just hot water, forming the basis for commercial development of mined oil sands. In 1929, bitumen, located on the current-day Fort Hills lease, became Alberta's first privately funded commercial oil sands plant. The property was developed by PEI entrepreneur Robert Fitzsimmons, producing asphalt for use in roofing and road paving material. In 1959, Shell successfully recovered bitumen in situ from Lease 13 in the Athabasca region using steam flooding and an alkaline solution or synthetic detergent. Shell proposed a 100,000 barrels per day commercial plant but couldn't get approval from the Alberta government. They eventually walked away from the project in 1968. Also in 1964, Great Canadian Oil Sands, who would later become Sancor Energy, began construction of an oil sands mine and bitumen upgrader just north of Fort McMurray. The $250 million project, now known as Sancor's Base Plant, was the largest private investment in Canada's history at the time. With the help of Chevron and Western Oil Sands, Shell completed construction of the Athabasca Oil Sands project in 2002. the largest facility to be built in the oil sands since Syncrude. After a number of stops and starts, Fort Hills was the sixth and last mining operation in the oil sands, and the second mine to be built without an upgrader. The facility began producing bitumen in 2018, pushing total bitumen production over 3 million barrels per day. Bitumen production from both mining and in situ facilities reached an annualized record of 3.3 million barrels per day in 2022, almost evenly split between the two extraction technologies. And this is Syncrude's bison herd thriving on reclaimed oil sands land. A first visitor to Syncrude's oil sands operation in northern Alberta might be surprised to see a herd of wood bison grazing on grasses on the side, but they represent a symbol of the company's promise to provide a sustainable ecosystem for future generations long after its operations have ended. Reclamation is an essential aspect of the mining process and integral to MAC's or MAC's towards Sustainable Mining Program, which focuses on the importance of sustainable practices, particularly with a focus on environmental stewardship in the mining sector. Syncrude's reclamation work has been so significant that both the company and the Fort Mackay First Nation have been honored with multiple awards recognizing the rehabilitation efforts that have had success.